Hey everybody, this is Garrett with Earth and Time, and today we're going to go take a look at an 1800s sailing vessel here in Galveston, Texas. It's known as the Alysa, and we're going to be able to tour the whole ship, including going down into it. So come join me today. Let's go check out the Alysa and learn a little bit about sailing in the 1800s. Let's get to it. So Galveston Harbor, you can see we're at Pier 21 here, has been a pretty famous port of call since the 1800s, the early to mid 1800s, and all the way back to when Jean Lafitte was set up one of the first communities here, European communities here, just on this side of the island. Now, today what you can see is things like, here's a drilling rig museum. If I pan to the left, we can see the battleship Texas that served in World War I, World War II. They're currently doing work on that. You can see some drilling rigs because the Gulf of Mexico region here is a big oil province. You can take a look at a big cruise ship in here. And of course, we can take a look at the ship, the Alysa. I will say on first glance, this is a pretty impressive ship, the Alysa, and I'm excited to go and explore it and see what life would be like on an 1877 sailing ship. As I start coming aboard, get an idea about the size. So I've been on cruise ships and other ships, and it's not nearly as wide as I thought it was going to be, but pretty cool to see nonetheless. So I can see, if I turn this around, you get an idea that I can see one side there, the other side there, and it's only maybe 20 feet across or so. So it's not a very wide ship. And as far as length goes, maybe a couple hundred feet. I'm sure they'll have statistics somewhere about the boat as we start exploring. So let's go see if we can get down into the hull of the ship and learn a little bit more about what the inside of an 1877 ship would have looked like. So interesting enough, this first building towards the front or the bow of the ship, if I peek in here, it says crew only, but this looks like this was the old kitchen, and they would have had it on top, which makes a lot of sense in case of fires. It'd be a lot easier to quench a fire from up here and not damage any of the goods. But you can see this is where they would have made meals for the sailors. Pretty interesting that they put this as the first building on this top part of the deck here. That makes a lot of sense from a safety point of view. So they do have steps that lead up all the way to the front of the boat. However, I'm going to go take the stairs down and see what's on the forward section here. I said the bow. I think forward is the correct one. I'm very not nautical, as I've mentioned in other videos, but I'm trying to learn. These are the bunks, and it looks like there's 2, 4, 6, 8 bunks that are built here now, and I don't know if they would have had hammocks hanging as well. I know that was a very popular way to have people sleep as well. So these would have been sleeping quarters for the crew. They'd walk up these little stairs and come back out on top of the deck. Now, if I think about old pirate ships, so I was thinking about that as I was coming to take a look at this. You know, I imagine that old pirate ships were not set up quite this way, right? So, of course, we have the galley here on the other side. There probably didn't have at least this building here. And you'll see this was actually for a crew called Damon, who worked day shift on Alyssa unless there was an emergency. So they would sleep in here. Interesting. And so they can immediately get up and help work on things. But I imagine pirates didn't have quite as many modern features as this, but I can imagine all the rope, and I can imagine all the sails, and I can imagine even during the Civil War that boats wouldn't have been too dissimilar from this. Of course, the Civil War ended about 12 years before the ship set sail. Okay, we can head down below deck and go see some more of the exhibits. We can take the officers' quarters and the exhibition deck. So again, it's fascinating to me as I walk down into the hull here, just seeing what it would be like to be on a boat in the 1800s that was traveling, I believe, all over the world. And I guess we'll learn a little bit more about what kind of work they were doing here on the Alysa. So it looks like this is a much more modern hatch that was added to this. And you'll see there's definitely some more modern features here, but you can learn a little bit more about what it was like to do a voyage to Galveston, and they started, it looks like, in Wales in the UK, and they would bring over material to the US, and it looks like to Mexico, maybe the Caribbean, and eventually they would end up here in Galveston. And here would be a crew that would have been on here. And you'll see there's ranges from age 16 all the way up to age 40 that would have been on board the ship. And this is talking about that crossing in 1883. So what's fascinating is they started their trip September 13th and arrived November 8th. So almost 2 months at sea coming across here. Pretty interesting. It would take that long to come across the ocean during that time in one of these boats. 2 months at sea is a long time. And then from Mexico, they actually came up to Galveston. So this ship actually did bring material to and from Galveston back in 1883. And it sounds like they spent the holidays here in Galveston and then got more cargo and off and moving. And here's what Galveston would have looked like during that time. It was quite the port city, and you can see where we're at. We're somewhere in this area. Okay, so we can go check out the engine room and officers' quarters going down this way. And coming in, here's the engine room. So this engine room would have been a little more modernized. So it says in 1918 they put in a modern engine. So although the ship was built 1877 and sailed, it was modernized so it can continue to be used in the early 1900s. So as I come up the stairs, you can see where the officers would have eaten, a lot more comfortable, or hung out. And you can get an idea, this would have been the first mate's cabin. So a little more space than what we saw for those bunks for the folks who were just working on the ship. So ship's officers would have been there. Our second mate's cabin. And you can get an idea where the captain's room was here. So that was the captain's cabin, and then he had this basically as his forward office, so he could have conversations and meet with his team members and discuss the business of the day. And it looks like they even had a spare cabin up here, probably for important guests or dignitaries that they would transport. So this area was known as the salon, which was the captain's office. And this is a settee, a carved wooden armrest as part of the original ship's furniture. Oh, that's cool. So this is all part of the original ship. So again, you can imagine what a captain's quarters would look like during various periods of time in the 1800s. Obviously this one's a little more probably opulent than maybe what you'd see in the old pirate ships or even some of the ships from the 1800s during the Civil War. But it really gives you an idea about living and working on one of these ships. From the captain's quarters, you come right up onto the aft of the ship, where of course they have the navigator would be back here and they'd be steering the rest of the ship, and you can really get a view of the whole of the Alysa. And you can see the helmsman box here and where the helmsman would have been at steering the ship. What's interesting is it's facing the wrong direction. So I wonder what the story is on that. I would expect it to face the front, which is that way. Also up here they had what was called a chart house, which is where you would have the navigator in doing work and trying to understand what their course was and make sure they were staying on course and they were getting where they needed to in the most efficient manner possible, and maybe even trying to figure out how to skirt things like storms. Well, I have to say this was really interesting coming and touring this 1877 ship, the Elissa. And again, imagining what it'd be like being on one of these ships in the 1800s, even back to the time of the pirates, to, you know, the Civil War time period, which was very important here to the city of Galveston, including the celebration of Juneteenth, which took place here. All right, with that being said, I hope you learned something. I hope you thought it was interesting. I know this is kind of a shorter video for me, but I had a lot of fun checking out this ship and imagine what life would be like on here. As long as you were not one of the workers, you were one of the captains or mates, life was probably a little bit better on one of these ships. They'd be long days, I'm sure. In fact, they said they were 4 hours on, 4 hours off in good weather, and bad weather you could be on as long as the bad weather persisted. So pretty rough lifestyle. And obviously, from what we learned, you can be out at sea for months. All right. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, you all know what to do by this time. Thank you all, take care, and see you on the next episode.